Read a book in 10 minutes. Today we're reading the famous book Wuthering Heights. The story takes place in the north of England. The main character is Heathcliff, a gypsy orphan. He is adopted by the old manor owner of Wuthering Heights, Yunhio. However, the old man's wife and his eldest son, Sindre, are both hostile to this unexpected visitor. In the family, only old Master Earnshaw and Earnshaw's youngest daughter, Catherine, welcome young Heathcliff with open arms. Mrs. Benshaw's fear that Heathcliff would grow up to take over their property filled her with trepidation and anxiety. This uneasiness gradually made her more distant and harsh toward Heathcliff. Sindre hated the strange child who had stolen his father's love from him, and he often punched and kicked Heathcliff. He often called Heathcliff a barking dog. He laughed at the weak Heathcliff, and in his heart he was terrified that Heathcliff would steal his place as the eldest son and his father's love. So much so that he has no love or respect for his own sister, Catherine. A few years later, the old master died. Hindley became the new master of Wuthering Heights. So he hurt Heathcliff and his own sister, Catherine, even more recklessly. The young Heathcliff was grateful for his adoption and for the warmth of Catherine's care. So he hid Sindre's atrocities in his heart. Catherine, a weak child, was often bullied by her brother Sindalar, but was powerless to fight back. His sensitive heart slowly approached Heathcliff, who also had a soft heart. Childhood Catherine and Heathcliff are happy together, they tolerate and understand each other. In front of him, Catherine could show her true self without pretense. Gradually, Heathcliff is attracted to this energetic and kind girl. In this way, the two children with the same heart gradually grew into adults. But the grown-ups didn't have the courage to dominate their own happiness as they once imagined. Although Catherine deeply loved Heathcliff, but because of their own education, and inwardly for Heathcliff's lowly status have some scruples. When it comes to marriage, she feels that the other party has no money and no status, and that it would be dishonorable for her to marry him, but in her heart, she could not live without Heathcliff. Catherine is caught up in her own internal struggle, while Heathcliff simply wants to be with Catherine forever. One day, Heathcliff goes out with Catherine and meets Edgar Linton, the young owner of the neighboring painted fields. Linton is gentle and elegant and attracts Catherine's attention. Catherine envies the warm and peaceful environment of painted fields and feels a sense of peace that she has never known before. And Linton fell in love with Catherine's beauty and began to pursue Catherine. Catherine was also in a state of hesitation, although she knew clearly that her heart still favored Heathcliff, and all her love was given to him. But on the other hand, she feels that marrying Heathcliff is a sign of lowering her status. Finally, Linton could not hold back his inner love for Catherine and proposed to Catherine. It is also on this night that Catherine tells her long-hidden heart to the maid, Din Nelly, who has taken care of her since she was a child. Heathcliff, who was eavesdropping, only heard Catherine say, "Marrying Heathcliff will lower my status." So he fled Wuthering Heights on that thunderous night in agony. Catherine ran barefoot in the rain, frantically searching for Heathcliff and trying to explain to him. However, Heathcliff disappeared without a trace as if he had vaporized. Catherine became very ill with pain, knowing that she had lost Heathcliff forever. A month later, Catherine and Linton were married. Years later, Heathcliff went from being a poor boy who was bullied to a rich and decent gentleman. Armed with money and full of anger, he was ready to start his revenge plan. He hated Sindre for having mistreated him and was jealous that the other man had been born into a father's love and wealth. The first step he takes to begin his revenge is to seize the lodge. Heathcliff knew that Sindre had been addicted to gambling after his wife's death, so he found a few people to make a game, so that Sindre would lose every time he gambled. In the end, Sindalar had to sell Wuthering Heights to cover his debts. When he took control of Wuthering Heights, he immediately reduced Sindre and his son Harrington to servants and drove them into the barn to live with the animals. He also wantonly insulted and beat the father and son, the previous suffering of his own 10 times, 100 times to vent on the poor father and son. Back in Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff, confronted with Catherine, who betrayed him, and Linton, who crossed the line, decided to ruin their marriage. He often ran to the painted hills to harass Catherine, said some fleshy love words to her, confessed his love, awakened her heart-dusty love for a long time. Later, Catherine really began to regret. She realized that she loved the original has always been Heathcliff. However, at this time, Catherine was already pregnant, on the one hand, her husband and child, on the other hand, the man she loved so much. Her heart was deeply tormented. Heathcliff constantly appeared in front of Catherine, left and right, Catherine in tears all day long, worried, and do not think about food. Soon, Catherine gave birth to a daughter Katie. The birth of the child made Catherine more grief. She could not let go of her lovely child, but also could not let go of her love for Heathcliff. Catherine and the two feelings between the constant entanglement, into depression, and finally because she could not withstand such a huge mental pressure, left the world. Lyndon also because of the loss of his wife heartbroken, closed his eyes forever. But after seeing The Great Revenge, Heathcliff was not happy, but because of Catherine's departure, his heart more and more empty and gloomy. Heathcliff took advantage of the innocence of Lyndon's sister, tricked her into marrying him, and took charge of Painted Hills after the deaths of Lyndon and Catherine. Heathcliff's plot all succeeded. He successively mastered the wealth of the two estates, determining the fate of all the people in the two estates. However, he was still unhappy, and even often took his anger out on the young children of the estates. Heathcliff wanted to destroy everyone, and he roared at the children of the manor, "As long as I live, you will not rest in peace." He imprisoned Syndra's son, Harrington, and Catherine's daughter, Katie Heathcliff, beside himself, and made the two children, who were supposed to be aristocrats, work early in the morning and late in the evening, and live a life less than intimidating. Knowing that Katie loved to read, he ordered all the books in the house to be burned so that Katie would have no books to read. Knowing that Harrington adored Katie, he deliberately insulted Harrington in front of Katie, making Harrington lose all his dignity. He did not even spare his own son. His son has been physically weak, but he is indifferent, but when his son is seriously ill, but also forced the sick and weak him to cheat Katie's heart, in order to achieve the purpose of torturing Katie. Later on, Harrington is 23 years old and he looks exactly like Heathcliff in his youth. Though deprived of education and lacking in earthly warmth, he was thick, faithful and graceful. And Kitty fell in love with him. Heathcliff had hoped that they would hate each other, but they actually fell in love. He was determined to break up the lovers. However, when he looked at them more closely, the old days when Catherine and he were in love came back to him. At this moment, the hatred in his heart subsided, love prevailed, and he could not bear to retaliate. So he let Harrington and Katie go. In the end, Harrington and Katie returned to Paintbrush Cottage and lived happily ever after. And Heathcliff was finally able to be with Catherine forever as he wished. One stormy night, Heathcliff walked into a cottage, the place where he and Catherine had played and laughed so many years ago. He ended his life peacefully, putting an end to all the tragedy. He couldn't let go of the hatred he felt inside, and for those who had hurt him, he made sure to make others experience the same pain. He thought he could redeem his own soul by destroying other people's lives, but in the end, he pushed himself into the abyss of doom. Finally, to end today's reading with a quote from the book, "The gentle and generous man is only slightly fairer than the arrogant and domineering man who is selfish. Happiness is finished when circumstances make both people feel that the interests of one are not the things to be cared for in the other's thoughts."